Waitress in Texas found $7 million buried by the Aryan Brotherhood under a dry creek bed. The sun hung low over the dusty horizon of West Texas, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Route 83. Maria Santos wiped down the same corner booth for the third time that evening, her mind wandering to the stack of overdue bills sitting on her kitchen counter. At 32, she'd been slinging hash at Dusty's Diner for nearly a decade, watching the same truckers roll through, the same ranchers order chicken-fried steak, the same faces blurring together in an endless loop of mediocrity. The diner sat on the edge of Terrell County, where the land stretched flat and unforgiving in every direction. Maria had grown up here, in a small house on the outskirts of Sanderson, raised by her grandmother after her mother disappeared into the drug scene of El Paso. She'd promised herself she'd escape this place, maybe go to nursing school in San Antonio, but life had other plans. First came the car accident that left her with medical debt, then her grandmother's stroke. And before she knew it, a decade had evaporated like water on hot pavement. If you're watching this, drop a comment and let me know where you're from. Don't forget to subscribe to follow Maria's story to the end. That Saturday started like any other. The morning shift had been slow, just a handful of regulars nursing coffee and trading gossip about cattle prices and the upcoming high school football game. By noon, the lunch rush had come and gone, leaving Maria with aching feet and exactly $43 in tips. Her manager, Dale Hutchins, a weathered man in his 60s with a permanent scowl, told her she could leave early if she wanted. "Storm's coming in from the west," he said, nodding toward the darkening sky. "Might as well get home before it hits." Maria didn't argue. She grabbed her purse from the office, signed out, and headed to her beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot. As she drove home, she noticed the clouds gathering, thick and grey, the kind that promised rain but rarely delivered in this drought-stricken corner of Texas. On impulse, she decided to take the long way home, down the dirt road that ran parallel to Sanderson Creek. The creek had been dry for 3 years straight, just a snaking gully of cracked earth and scattered rocks. Maria used to play there as a child, when water actually flowed during the spring thaw. Now it was just another reminder of how things dried up and died in this part of the world. She pulled off the main road onto the dirt track, driving slowly to avoid the deeper ruts. Something made her stop about a mile in, maybe the way the light hit the creek bed, or maybe just a need to be alone with her thoughts. She parked and got out, walking down the gentle slope toward the dry channel. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain and creosote bushes. Maria stood at the edge of the creek bed, looking down at the exposed layers of sediment and stone. That's when she saw it. A corner of blue plastic sheeting, barely visible beneath a collapsed section of the bank. It looked out of place, too bright, too synthetic against the natural browns and greys of the landscape. Curiosity pulled her down into the creek bed. Her sneakers crunched on the dried mud as she approached the blue tarp. She crouched down, hesitating for just a moment before pulling at the corner. The plastic came away easily, revealing more underneath, heavy-duty plastic wrapped around something solid. Maria's heart began to pound. She pulled harder, digging with her hands to expose more of whatever lay buried. The plastic was wrapped tight, sealed with duct tape. She found a sharp rock and cut through the layers, peeling them back like an onion. Inside were bricks, but not the kind used for building. These were wrapped in clear plastic, compressed and uniform. Her hands trembled as she picked one up. It was dense, about the size of a hardcover book, and through the clear wrapping she could see the unmistakable green of $100 bills. "Jesus Christ," she whispered. Maria sat back on her heels, staring at what she'd uncovered. There had to be dozens of these bricks, maybe more, all carefully wrapped and buried. She pulled out another, then another, stacking them beside her. Her mind raced, trying to calculate how much money this could be. 50,000 per brick, 100,000, more. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Maria looked up at the darkening sky, then back at the money. Every instinct told her to leave it, to cover it back up and walk away. Money buried like this belonged to someone, and that someone was probably dangerous. But as she stared at those bricks of cash, all she could think about was her grandmother's nursing home bills, the leak in her roof, the car that needed new brakes, the life that always seemed just out of reach. She made a decision. Working quickly, Maria began carrying the bricks to her car. It took 6 trips, her arms aching with the weight, her breath coming in gasps. She loaded everything into her trunk and back seat, covering it with an old blanket she kept for emergencies. The first drops of rain began to fall as she finished, fat and heavy, darkening the dust on her windshield. Maria drove home in a daze, barely registering the road in front of her. She lived in a small rental house on the poor side of town, a wood-frame structure that had seen better days. She pulled into her detached garage, closing the door before she began unloading. It took another hour to get everything inside, stacking the bricks in her bedroom closet, her hands shaking the entire time. When she finally finished, Maria sat on her bed and cut open one of the bricks with kitchen scissors. The bills were real, she was certain of that. She'd handled enough cash in her years at the diner to know the feel of genuine currency. She counted one brick completely. It held exactly $100,000 in $100 bills. She did quick math. There were 70 bricks, $7 million. Maria felt like she might throw up. She walked to her bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her dark hair was tangled, her face pale beneath her tan, her brown eyes wide with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. What had she done? She spent that night pacing her small house, unable to sleep, unable to think clearly. Every car that drove past made her jump. Every creak of the house settling made her heart race. She knew she should call the police, turn it in, do the right thing. But then she thought about her life. 10 years of minimum wage and tips, living paycheck to paycheck, watching everyone around her struggle and fail. This money could change everything. By morning, Maria had made up her mind. She would keep it. At least for now. She would be smart about it, careful. She wouldn't spend it all at once, wouldn't draw attention. She'd pay off her debt slowly, maybe move away in a few months, start fresh somewhere new. It was a fantasy, she knew, but it was the first time in years she'd felt anything like hope. What Maria didn't know, couldn't have known, was that the money belonged to the Texas chapter of the Aryan Brotherhood, buried there 6 months earlier by a man named Curtis Wade. Curtis had been part of a methamphetamine operation that stretched from El Paso to Houston, and the $7 million was profit from their biggest deal yet. The plan had been to leave it buried for a year, let the heat die down after a federal raid that had taken out several members of their organization. Curtis was currently sitting in a county jail in Fort Stockton awaiting trial, but his brother Ray Wade was still free. And Ray was getting nervous. The feds were closing in, and that money was their insurance policy, their escape fund. In 3 days, Ray would go to dig it up, planning to move it to a new location. In 3 days, he would find nothing but disturbed earth and an empty hole. Maria returned to work on Monday, moving through her shift in a fog. Every time the door opened, she expected to see men in suits or worse. Dale noticed she was distracted but said nothing, probably figuring she had man troubles or something, if only it were that simple. Tuesday passed the same way. Maria couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She kept checking the news, searching online for any reports of missing money or gang activity in the area. Nothing. Maybe she'd gotten lucky. Maybe whoever buried it had forgotten about it, or been arrested, or killed. Maybe she really could get away with this. On Wednesday morning, Dale asked her to cover the closing shift. Lucy Martinez, the evening waitress, had called in sick. Maria agreed, grateful for something to occupy her mind. The diner stayed busy through dinner, a few ranching families, some oil field workers coming off shift. By 9 o'clock, the place had emptied out except for one man sitting at the counter. He'd been there for over an hour, nursing a single cup of coffee, not saying much. Maria had seen him come in around 8, a tall man in his 40s with a shaved head and a scraggly beard. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt, and there was something about him that made her uncomfortable. His eyes were cold, pale blue, and they followed her movements around the diner. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just the check," he said. His accent was local, West Texas drawl, but there was an edge to it. Maria printed the check and laid it on the counter. He pulled out a $20 bill, more than enough for a cup of coffee, and set it down. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something else, a photograph. "You recognize this area?" he asked, sliding the photo across the counter. Maria's blood ran cold. It was a picture of Sanderson Creek, the exact stretch where she'd found the money. She could see the distinctive curve of the creek bed, the cluster of mesquite trees on the north bank. "Looks like out by the old creek," she said, her mouth suddenly dry. "Why?" The man studied her face for a long moment. "Someone was out there recently, disturbed something that didn't belong to them." "Done, I wouldn't know anything about that," Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's funny, because a woman matching your description was seen parking out there Saturday afternoon, right around the time our property went missing." Maria felt her legs go weak. "I think you have me confused with someone else." "Do I?" The man stood up, and Maria noticed the tattoos on his arms for the first time. Prison ink, crude and faded. On his neck, partially hidden by his collar, she saw the unmistakable triple lightning bolts of Aryan Brotherhood symbolism. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Return what you took, and we'll forget this ever happened. Keep it, and things get real bad for you real fast. You got 24 hours to think about it." He walked out of the diner, leaving Maria standing behind the counter, trembling. Through the window, she watched him get into a black pickup truck and drive away. She grabbed the phone with shaking hands and called Dale, telling him she felt sick and needed to lock up early. He grumbled but agreed. Maria locked the doors and ran to her car. Her mind was racing. They knew. Somehow they'd found her. She had to get the money and run, tonight, before they came back. She drove home well over the speed limit, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. As she pulled onto her street, she noticed a car parked across from her house. Another pickup, this one dark blue. Someone was sitting inside, watching. She drove past her house, not slowing down, her heart hammering in her chest. They were already watching her place. She couldn't go home. She needed help, needed to think. She pulled into a gas station 3 blocks away and sat in her car, trying to calm down enough to figure out what to do next. Her phone rang, making her jump. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail, but it rang again immediately. On the 3rd call, she answered. "Hello? Maria Santos." It was the man from the diner. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We know where you live, where you work, where your grandmother is staying at Sunset Hills Care Home. You have until tomorrow night to bring back what's ours. Every dollar. We'll be in touch with the location." The line went dead. Maria sat there, her whole body shaking. They knew about her grandmother. They were threatening her family. This wasn't just about her anymore. She thought about calling the police, but what would she tell them? That she'd stolen $7 million from a gang, and now they wanted it back. She'd be arrested on the spot, and her grandmother would be left vulnerable while she sat in a cell. She had one option left. She needed to disappear, and she needed to do it right now. But first, she had to get that money. Maria waited until midnight before attempting to approach her house. She parked several blocks away and walked through backyards, staying in the shadows. The pickup truck was still there, but the driver appeared to be asleep, or at least not paying close attention. She circled around to her back fence, climbed over, and let herself in through the back door as quietly as possible. Inside, her house was dark and still. Maria moved quickly to her bedroom, pulling the bricks of money from the closet and stuffing them into 2 large duffel bags. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped one of the bricks, and the sound seemed impossibly loud in the silent house. She froze, listening, but heard nothing from outside. It took 15 minutes to pack all the money. The bags were incredibly heavy, but adrenaline gave her strength. She grabbed her passport, some clothes, and a framed photo of her grandmother. Nothing else mattered. She was about to leave through the back door when she heard footsteps on her front porch. They were here. Maria's heart nearly stopped. She grabbed the duffel bags and ran for the back door, stumbling under their weight. Behind her, she heard the front door being kicked in, wood splintering, male voices shouting. She crashed through the back door and ran across her small yard, throwing the bags over the fence before climbing after them. She could hear them behind her now, crashing through the house. Maria grabbed the bags and ran, her lungs burning, her arms screaming with the effort. She made it to her car and threw everything in the trunk, jamming the key into the ignition with trembling hands. The engine turned over just as she saw 2 figures emerge from between the houses, running toward her. Maria floored it, tires screeching as she pulled away. In her rearview mirror, she saw one of the men pull out a phone, already calling someone. They'd be following her within minutes. She had to get off the main roads, had to lose them somehow. She drove east on back roads, her mind racing through her options. She couldn't go to Mexico. The border was too well watched, and they'd expect that. She needed to go somewhere they wouldn't think to look, somewhere she could hide long enough to figure out her next move. An hour later, Maria pulled into a truck stop outside of Ozona. She was exhausted, running on pure adrenaline and fear. She parked between 2 semis, trying to make her car less visible, and sat there shaking. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You can run, but you can't hide. We'll find you." Maria turned off her phone and threw it out the window. They could track that. She went inside the truck stop and bought a burner phone with cash, then got back in her car and kept driving. She had $7 million and the most dangerous gang in Texas looking for her. She needed a plan, needed allies, needed something other than fear and desperation. As the sun rose over the Texas plains, Maria kept driving north, putting as many miles as possible between herself and Sanderson. She had no idea where she was going, no idea what she would do when she got there. All she knew was that her old life was over, burned away the moment she'd pulled back that blue tarp in the creek bed. The road stretched ahead, endless and uncertain, carrying her toward an unknown future where every decision could mean the difference between freedom and death. Ray Wade stood in the empty creek bed, staring at the disturbed earth where $7 million should have been. His jaw clenched so tight he could hear his teeth grinding. Beside him, his nephew Tyler kicked at the dirt, cursing under his breath. "How the hell did someone find it?" Tyler asked. "We were careful. Nobody knew about this spot except Curtis and us." "Doesn't matter how," Ray said, his voice cold and controlled. "What matters is getting it back." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. It was answered on the first ring. "We got a problem," Ray said. "The stash is gone. Someone dug it up." There was silence on the other end. Then a voice Ray recognized as belonging to Jack Thornton, the head of their organization's Texas operations. "Gone? All of it?" "Every dollar. Ground's been disturbed recently, probably within the last few days. There's tire tracks heading back toward the main road." "Find out who did this," Jack said. "Find them fast. That money isn't just cash, Ray. It's our operating budget for the next year. Without it, we've got nothing. I'm on it, Ray said. He hung up and turned to Tyler. Get on social media, local news, everything. Someone saw something. This is a small town. People notice when something out of the ordinary happens. It took them less than 24 hours to get a lead. A rancher named Bob McAllister mentioned to his wife that he'd seen a car parked by the creek on Saturday afternoon while he was checking fences. His wife mentioned it at the beauty salon. The beautician's daughter worked as a cashier at the grocery store and mentioned it to Tyler when he came in to buy cigarettes. Yeah, my mom said Mr. McAllister saw some woman out there, the girl had said, not thinking anything of it. Probably just someone taking pictures of the scenery or whatever. This woman, did he see what she looked like? The girl shrugged. I don't know, my mom might know more. She's friends with Mrs. McAllister. An hour later, Ray had a description. Hispanic woman, early 30s, driving an older model Honda Civic. That narrowed it down considerably in a town the size of Sanderson. Tyler started calling around to contacts at the DMV and local law enforcement, people who owed them favors or were on their payroll. By Tuesday evening, they had a name, Maria Santos, waitress at Dusty's Diner. They had her address, her work schedule, even knew where her grandmother was in a nursing home. Ray smiled when he got the information. This was going to be easier than he thought. He decided to approach her at work first, give her a chance to return the money peacefully. If she was smart, she'd take the out. If not, well, there were other ways to persuade people. Ray had spent 15 years in prison for armed robbery and assault. He'd learned patience there, learned how to read people, how to use fear as a tool. This waitress would cave. They always did. But when he showed her the photograph at the diner Wednesday night, something in her eyes told him this might not be as simple as he'd hoped. She was scared, yes, but there was also a defiance there, a desperation that made people unpredictable. He'd given her the 24-hour warning, hoping fear would do the work for him. Then she'd run. She rabbited, Tyler reported Thursday morning, calling Ray from his position outside Maria's house. Place is empty. Looks like she grabbed what she could and took off in the middle of the night. Ray slammed his fist into the dashboard of his truck. Find her. Check her credit cards, her phone, everything. She can't have gotten far with that much cash. But Maria had been smart. She ditched her phone, wasn't using credit cards. By Friday morning, it was like she'd vanished into thin air. Ray knew they needed to expand their search, put the word out to their network across Texas. Someone would spot her eventually. What about the grandmother? Tyler suggested. We could use her for leverage. Ray considered it. The old woman was in a nursing home in Sanderson, completely vulnerable. But kidnapping or hurting her would bring too much heat, too much attention from law enforcement. They needed to stay under the radar, especially with Curtis's trial coming up. Not yet, Ray said, but keep someone watching the place. If Maria tries to contact her, we'll know. Meanwhile, Jack Thornton was getting impatient. He called Ray every few hours, demanding updates. The money was supposed to fund a major expansion of their operations, new connections with suppliers in Oklahoma and Louisiana. Without it, deals were falling through. People were getting nervous. You've got 1 week, Jack told Ray on Friday night. 1 week to find this woman and get our money back. After that, I'm sending in people who specialize in this kind of thing, and they won't be as gentle as you've been. Ray knew what that meant. Jack had connections to prison gangs across the Southwest, enforcers who wouldn't hesitate to torture or kill to get results. If they got involved, this would turn into a bloodbath, and Maria Santos would be the least of their worries. He had to find her first. Ray and Tyler spent the weekend checking bus stations, talking to informants, spreading money around to get people looking. They got a possible hit on Saturday. A woman matching Maria's description had been seen at a motel outside of San Angelo. Ray drove there immediately, but by the time he arrived, she was gone again. The desk clerk remembered her because she'd paid cash and seemed nervous. "Which way did she go?" Ray demanded. The clerk shrugged. "Didn't see. She left before dawn." Ray stood in the parking lot, frustrated. Maria was staying one step ahead of them, moving frequently, keeping to cash. She was smarter than he'd given her credit for, but everyone made mistakes eventually. All he had to do was wait for hers. Back in Sanderson, Maria's disappearance hadn't gone unnoticed. Dale Hutchins had reported her missing to the local sheriff when she didn't show up for her shifts. The sheriff, a man named Tom Bradford, knew Maria as a quiet, reliable person. Her sudden disappearance was out of character. Bradford started asking questions, talking to Maria's neighbors, checking her house. He found the broken front door, signs of a struggle. Something wasn't right. He called in the county investigator and started treating it as a potential kidnapping or worse. Ray heard about the investigation through his contacts in the sheriff's department. This complicated things. Now they had to avoid law enforcement while hunting for Maria. One wrong move, and they'd all be under scrutiny. "We need to be smart about this," Ray told Tyler. "No more direct approaches. We find her, we watch her, and we move when the time is right." By Monday, they caught a break. One of their contacts in Abilene reported seeing Maria at a Walmart, buying supplies. She was heading north, maybe toward Oklahoma, or even further. Ray and Tyler immediately headed in that direction, following the trail of small purchases and cheap motels. Maria was exhausted. She'd been driving for days, stopping only for a few hours of sleep at roadside motels, always paying cash, always moving. The duffel bags of money sat in her trunk, a constant weight on her mind. She knew she couldn't keep running forever. She needed a plan, needed to either hide the money so well that no one would ever find it, or find a way to launder it slowly over time. But first, she needed help. In Amarillo, Maria found an internet cafe and used her burner phone to search for lawyers who specialized in criminal defense. She couldn't exactly explain her situation over the phone, but she needed legal advice, needed to understand her options. After an hour of research, she found a name: Richard Mora, a defense attorney in Lubbock with a reputation for taking on difficult cases. She drove to Lubbock that afternoon, a 3-hour trip that felt like an eternity. Every car behind her seemed suspicious. Every glance from a stranger felt like recognition. She was paranoid, jumping at shadows, but she couldn't help it. The Aryan Brotherhood had resources, connections. They could be anywhere. Richard Mora's office was in a modest building downtown. Maria waited until his secretary left for lunch before approaching, not wanting witnesses to her presence. She knocked on his door, and a man in his 50s with graying hair and tired eyes looked up from his desk. "We're closed for lunch," he said. "Come back in an hour." "I can't," Maria said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "I need help, and I need it now." Something in her voice made him pause. He gestured to a chair. "Sit down. Tell me what's going on." Maria took a deep breath and told him everything, finding the money, the confrontation at the diner, running for her life. She left out the part about still having the money, testing to see how he'd react. Richard listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious as she talked. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his face. "You're in serious trouble," he said. "The Aryan Brotherhood doesn't forgive and forget. They'll hunt you until they get their money back or you're dead. Your only real option is to go to the authorities, turn over the money, and enter witness protection." "But I'd go to jail," Maria said. "I stole it." "You found it," Richard corrected. "There's a difference. Yes, you should have reported it immediately, but given the circumstances, I think we could argue you were acting under extreme emotional distress. The bigger issue is getting you somewhere safe before these people find you." "What if I wanted to keep some of it?" Maria asked quietly. Not all of it, but enough to start over somewhere new. Richard's expression hardened. Then you're on your own. I don't help criminals, even sympathetic ones. Either you do this the right way, or you walk out that door and don't come back. Maria stood up slowly. Thank you for your time. She left the office feeling more alone than ever. The lawyer was right. Her only legal option was to give up the money and hope for protection, but that meant giving up the one chance she'd ever have to escape her life of poverty and struggle. It meant going back to being nobody, nothing, just another working-class woman grinding through life until she died. She couldn't do it. She wouldn't. That night, Maria checked into a motel on the outskirts of Lubbock and sat on the bed, staring at the duffel bags. $7 million. It could buy her a new identity, a new life in another country. Mexico was too close, but what about further south? Central America, South America, or maybe Canada, slip across the northern border where they wouldn't be looking. She spent hours researching on her burner phone, reading about countries without extradition treaties, places where Americans could live cheaply and anonymously. Guatemala looked promising. So did Belize. She could buy property, pay cash, create a new identity through local contacts. It would take planning, take time, but it was possible. The next morning, Maria drove to a storage facility and rented a unit under a fake name, paying for 6 months in advance with cash. She moved most of the money there, keeping only $100,000 in her car for immediate expenses. If they caught her, at least they wouldn't get everything. The rest would be waiting when she was ready to make her move. But as she was leaving the storage facility, she saw it, a black pickup truck parked across the street, the same one that had been outside her house in Sanderson. Her blood ran cold. They'd found her. Maria didn't hesitate. She jumped in her car and took off, tires squealing. In her rearview mirror, she saw the pickup pull out and follow. This time they weren't being subtle. They were coming for her, and they weren't going to let her escape again. The chase tore through Lubbock streets, Maria running red lights and weaving through traffic. The pickup stayed close behind, driven by someone who clearly had no regard for traffic laws or safety. Maria's Honda wasn't built for this kind of driving, the engine straining as she pushed it to its limits. She turned down a side street, hoping to lose them in the residential neighborhoods, but they stayed right on her tail. Up ahead, she saw a school zone, children playing in a playground. She couldn't lead these men through there, couldn't risk innocent lives. She made a split-second decision and turned into an industrial area, warehouses and abandoned buildings lining the streets. The pickup followed, getting closer. Maria could see Ray Wade behind the wheel, his face twisted with anger. She turned into an alley, hoping there was an exit on the other side, but it was a dead end. She slammed on the brakes and jumped out, running for a gap between buildings. Ray and Tyler were out of the truck instantly, chasing after her. Maria ran with everything she had, her lungs burning, her legs pumping. She could hear their footsteps behind her, getting closer. She turned a corner and found herself in an empty lot, chain-link fence on all sides. She was trapped. Ray and Tyler walked toward her slowly, spreading out to cut off any escape routes. Ray was breathing hard, but he had a smile on his face. End of the line, Maria. Time to give back what you took. I don't have it with me, Maria said, backing away until she hit the fence. It's hidden. You'll never find it without me. Then you're going to take us to it, Ray said, right now. And if I do, you'll just kill me anyway. Ray shrugged. Maybe. Maybe not. But if you don't, we'll definitely kill you, and then we'll go have a chat with your grandmother. Your choice. Maria's mind raced. She had to buy time, had to think of something. The money's in a storage unit, but I'm not the only one who knows about it. If I don't check in with someone by tonight, they go to the police with everything. It was a bluff, a desperate lie, but Ray hesitated. Who? A lawyer. I told him everything, gave him proof. Insurance in case something happened to me. Ray studied her face, trying to determine if she was lying. Before he could respond, they heard sirens in the distance getting closer. Someone must have called the police about the chase through the city streets. Ray cursed and looked at Tyler. "We need to go," Tyler said urgently. "Cops will be here in seconds." Ray pointed at Maria. "This isn't over. We'll find you again, and next time there won't be any interruptions." Dreet, they ran back to their truck and took off just as the first police cruiser turned into the industrial area. Maria waited until the cops arrived, then told them a modified version of the truth. She was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend and his brother. They'd been chasing her through the city. She gave fake names and a fake story about a relationship gone wrong. The police took her statement and offered to escort her to file a restraining order, but Maria declined. She couldn't afford to get too entangled with law enforcement. She thanked them and drove away as soon as they let her go, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. She couldn't stay in Texas anymore. Ray and Tyler knew what she looked like, knew her car. They'd find her again, and next time she might not be so lucky. She needed to get out of the state, maybe out of the country entirely. But first, she needed to retrieve the money from the storage unit. Maria waited until after dark, then drove back to the storage facility. She parked several blocks away and approached on foot, watching for any sign of surveillance. The place seemed quiet, just a few other people accessing their units. She quickly loaded the duffel bags back into her car and drove away, this time heading west toward New Mexico. As she crossed the state line, Maria felt a small measure of relief. She was out of Texas, at least temporarily, but she knew this wasn't over. The Aryan Brotherhood had a long reach, connections in multiple states. She needed to keep moving, keep changing locations, until she could find a way to disappear for good. Somewhere behind her, Ray Wade was regrouping, making calls, spreading word through the organization's network. The hunt for Maria Santos had become personal now. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect, about making an example. No one stole from the Aryan Brotherhood and lived to tell about it. The next several weeks became a blur of motion for Maria. She moved through New Mexico like a ghost, never staying in one place more than 2 nights. She abandoned her Honda in Albuquerque and bought a used Ford pickup from a private seller with cash. No paperwork, no trail. She changed her appearance, cutting and dyeing her hair, buying new clothes, glasses she didn't need. She became someone else, a woman with no past and no future, living in the eternal present of survival. But the stress was taking its toll. She wasn't eating properly, wasn't sleeping more than a few hours at a time. Every stranger was a potential threat, every car behind her a possible tail. The money that was supposed to represent freedom had become a prison of paranoia and fear. In Santa Fe, Maria checked into a rundown motel and tried to think clearly. She needed a long-term plan. She couldn't keep running forever. Eventually she'd make a mistake, and they'd catch her. She pulled out the burner phone and started researching again, looking for ways to disappear permanently. That's when she found the forums, hidden corners of the internet where people discussed false identities, border crossings, living off the grid. She read stories of people who'd successfully disappeared, who'd built new lives under new names. It was possible, but it required help, required connections she didn't have. One post caught her attention. A user named Ghostwalker offered services, fake documents, secure transportation, relocation assistance. The prices were steep, requiring upfront payment in cryptocurrency. It was risky, possibly a scam, but Maria was running out of options. She spent the next few days learning about cryptocurrency, figuring out how to convert cash into Bitcoin without leaving a trail. It was more complicated than she'd expected, involving multiple transactions and exchanges, but she managed to transfer $50,000 worth. She contacted Ghostwalker with an encrypted message, explaining her situation in vague terms. The response came 12 hours later. Services available. Need 3 weeks prep time. Location TBD. Deposit required 100K equivalent BTC. Final payment on delivery 200K. $300,000 total. It was a fortune, but Maria had a fortune to spend. She confirmed her acceptance and made the deposit transfer. Now she just had to survive 3 more weeks. Back in Texas, Ray Wade was getting desperate. Jack Thornton had made good on his threat, sending in outside help, 2 enforcers from the Oklahoma chapter named Dustin Reeves and Marcus Cross. These men had reputations for brutality, for getting results no matter the cost. Their arrival made Ray nervous. If they found Maria first, there was no telling how far they'd go. We've been tracking her through small cash purchases and motel registrations, Ray explained to them. She was in Lubbock last week, then Albuquerque. Trail goes cold after that. Dustin, a massive man with scars across his knuckles and a cold, dead look in his eyes, just nodded. We'll find her. We always do. They expanded the search, putting the word out to associates in Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico. They circulated Maria's description, offered rewards for information. It was only a matter of time before someone spotted her. That break came in Flagstaff, Arizona. A gas station attendant recognized Maria from a photo Dustin showed him. She'd been there 2 days earlier, heading west. The hunt shifted direction, moving toward California. Maria had made it to the California border when Ghost Walker finally contacted her with details. Meet in Mexicali, cross border on foot at San Luis. Contact will meet you south side with documents. From there, transport to Guatemala City. New identity waiting. It was happening. In 5 days, Maria would cross into Mexico with a new name, new papers, and enough money to disappear forever. She just had to make it to the meeting point. She drove south through California, keeping to back roads, staying in cheap motels. In San Diego, she rented a storage unit and deposited most of the remaining money, taking only what she needed for the journey. The rest would be retrieved later through Ghost Walker's network. The night before she was supposed to cross, Maria stayed in a motel in Calexico, right on the border. She couldn't sleep, her mind racing with possibilities. By tomorrow night, she'd be in Mexico. By next week, she'd be in Guatemala. By next month, she'd have a new identity, a new life. She'd made it. She'd actually made it, but fate had one more twist in store. Dustin and Marcus had tracked her to San Diego through a credit card transaction at the storage facility. Maria had made one mistake, used an old card she'd forgotten about just to get through the gate. It was enough. They arrived in Calexico on the same night, checking motels, showing Maria's photo. The desk clerk at the Desert Rose Motel recognized her immediately. "Room 112, he said, pocketing the $100 bill Dustin handed him. "Been here since this afternoon." Dustin and Marcus waited until 3 a.m. when the motel was quiet and dark. They approached room 112 silently, Marcus picking the lock with practiced ease. They pushed the door open, expecting to find Maria sleeping. The room was empty. Maria had sensed something wrong, some instinct honed by weeks of running. She'd noticed a car in the parking lot that didn't belong. 2 men who'd been sitting too still, watching too intently. She'd climbed out the bathroom window an hour earlier, leaving most of her possessions behind, taking only 1 duffel bag and her burner phone. She walked to the border crossing on foot, blending in with the early morning workers heading into Mexico. The crossing was busy, chaotic, perfect cover. She made it through with barely a glance from the border agent, her heart pounding the entire time. On the Mexican side, she found the contact point Ghost Walker had specified, a small cafe near the bus station. A woman in her 30s sat at a corner table, reading a newspaper. She looked up as Maria approached. "Maria Santos?" the woman asked in Spanish. "Yes." I'm Elena. I have your documents. Follow me. Elena led her to a parking lot where an older van waited. Inside were Maria's new identity papers, Canadian passport, driver's license, credit cards, all in the name of Catherine Morrison. The quality was exceptional, professional-grade forgeries that would pass all but the most detailed inspection. The bus to Guadalajara leaves in 2 hours, Elena said. From there, you'll fly to Guatemala City. Someone will meet you at the airport with the rest of your documents and take you to your new home. The property is already purchased in your new name, utilities connected, bank accounts established. Maria felt tears in her eyes. It was really happening. She was going to make it. Thank you, she whispered. Eleanor smiled. We help people like you, people who need a second chance. Just remember, once you cross that line, your old life is over. Maria Santos died today. Catherine Morrison is born. Don't look back. Catherine nodded. She understood. She took the documents, memorized her new birth date, her new history. 2 hours later, she was on a bus heading south, leaving Texas, leaving the Aryan Brotherhood, leaving her old life behind. Dustin and Marcus discovered her escape too late. By the time they realized she'd crossed the border, Catherine Morrison was already on a plane to Central America. They tried to track her through the Mexican authorities, but the trail had gone cold. Without her real name, without identification, she'd vanished completely. Ray Wade received the call with resignation. They'd lost her. $7 million gone. Jack Thornton was furious, threatening consequences, but what could they do? The money was gone. The woman was gone. They'd failed. At least we got Curtis out on bail, Tyler offered weakly. Ray didn't respond. This failure would follow him, would damage his reputation in the organization. But more than that, it ate at him that some waitress had outsmarted them, had taken their money and disappeared. It was the kind of story that would be told for years, a cautionary tale about underestimating people. 3 months later, Catherine Morrison stood on the balcony of her modest house in Antigua, Guatemala, looking out over the colonial city and the volcanoes beyond. She'd been careful with the money, investing it slowly, learning Spanish, building a quiet life. She worked part-time at a small bookstore, volunteered at a local school, made friends with her neighbors. To everyone who knew her, she was simply a Canadian expat who decided to retire early to a beautiful country. At night, sometimes, she thought about her grandmother, still in the nursing home in Sanderson. She'd arranged for anonymous payments to cover her care, routed through so many intermediaries that it could never be traced back. It wasn't the same as being there, but it was something. She thought about the life she'd left behind, the years of struggle and poverty, the feeling of being trapped in a life that was going nowhere. She didn't regret taking the money. Didn't regret running. Given the same choice, she'd do it again. The Aryan Brotherhood still existed, still operated in Texas and across the Southwest, but they'd moved on to other concerns, other operations. Maria Santos was a footnote, a story of the one that got away. They had no idea that she was living comfortably in Guatemala, that she'd won. Catherine Morrison went inside, poured herself a glass of wine, and sat down to read. Tomorrow, she'd go to the market, maybe take a Spanish class, perhaps meet friends for dinner. It was a simple life, unremarkable in most ways, but it was hers. She'd earned it, fought for it, risked everything for it. And in the end, that's all anyone could really ask for. A chance to start over, to become someone new, to find freedom in a world that often offered none. She'd found it beneath a blue tarp in a dried creek bed, wrapped in plastic and buried in the Texas dirt. She'd seized it with both hands and held on tight, no matter what tried to take it away. The past was gone. The future was open. And Catherine Morrison was finally, truly free.